Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to class, Center for Law and Social Policy. I'm David Stockwell, and I direct the Center for Post-Secondary Economic Success here at class. And we're really grateful to all of you for coming out today to talk about this important topic of how public benefits can help fill the financial gaps for our low-income college students. This is part of CLAP's overall work. There's no single bullet to conquer poverty, but we work on a variety of different policy approaches. And so today's topic and our work more generally on post-secondary education, workforce development, really are part of that overall strategy to advance policy solutions to address barriers that low-income individuals face to escaping poverty and achieving financial success for themselves and their families. Strategies to enable today's college students to access and complete college. We need to take note of the changing nature of who today's students are. Particularly, these strategies can help low-income adults, many of whom are working and raising families, achieve economic success and obtain the credentials, post-secondary credentials that will help them succeed in the labor market. We'd like to thank the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for its support of the Reimagining Aid, Design, and Delivery Initiative, RAD, which helped sponsor this work. And also thank our partners at the Urban Institute, which work with us on this particular piece of the RAD initiative. So now it's my pleasure to turn over to your distinguished moderator, Doug Letterman, who is the editor and one of 3 founders of Inside Higher Ed, and has covered many changes over the past several decades in post-secondary education policy and practice. He knows a lot about what's happening with today's students, and we're really grateful to Doug for joining us and for moderating this excellent panel. So thank you.
Thanks for having me here. It's great to be at class, but I'm really pleased to be part of this program today. From the coverage of higher education in many of our leading newspapers today, and from the policy focus of some politicians, you might think that the biggest problems in terms of college access and affordability today are the Brooklyn barista who has $100,000 in debt from NYU, and the fact that the Pell Grant recipients are greatly underrepresented at the 8 Ivy League universities. I don't mean to belittle or make light of those issues. They're real. But sometimes we need reports like the one CLASP is releasing today, and the conversation that we're about to have, to redirect our focus to the kinds of concerns that, to my mind, federal financial aid and social policy are really designed to focus on, which is how to make college possible for those for whom it wouldn't be possible without real assistance from government and others. So we're going to, we've got a panel of really thoughtful people here today from various perspectives who are going to talk about this set of issues. And I think we're going to go, you're starting, right? So we're going to go in order from my left, or we're going to go you and then Angela. Okay, so anyway, to my immediate left is Amy Ellen Duke Benfield, who's a senior policy analyst here at CLASP at the Center for Post-Secondary and Economic Success, and the author of the report that you have in front of you. She also worked at the Urban Institute before. I'm not going to go read the whole bio because most of you know how to use the internet and figure that out. The second speaker is going to be Angela Johnson, who's on my far left, who's the Executive Director of Enrollment and Student Financial Aid at Cuyahoga Community College in my hometown of Cleveland. And she began her work 25 years ago at Ohio State. And she's sort of will present the institutional perspective, because she's been carrying out some of these programs at Cuyahoga, which is one of the bigger and, to my mind, better community colleges in the country. And then in the middle of the two is Mark Mitsui, who's the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Community Colleges in the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education at the Ed Department. Previously was at institutions as well, as president of North Seattle Community College, and worked in Washington Community College, several other Washington State community colleges, and he's also been involved at the state level in policy work on working on their performance-based funding plan. So he can sort of talk about the government perspective, both the federal and state level. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to
Thanks. I'm delighted that you all joined us today for this exciting topic. Yes, the paper is dense at times. Hopefully hopefully the paper does demystify some of the mystery around the interaction between some of these programs. But to briefly provide you an overview with what I'm going to say, I'm going to talk a little bit about the level of student need that students are facing, why we need to consider public benefits as a possible support if we're going to get serious about more low-income students persisting and completing in post-secondary, some of the opportunities and challenges that exist when trying to connect students to public benefits. I'll provide a few examples for folks to give you a sense of what are some of the opportunities that exist out there, what are some of the recommendations that we have in terms of changing those policies. And then what can we do within HEA, the Higher Education Act, as that's being reauthorized to better support low-income students and connect them to benefits. And then closing in some of the challenges that are related to this work. As all of you know who are here, because I know many of you, that post-secondary credentials are a great investment for individuals, families, and communities, and that's why we invest a lot of time and energy in them. They lead to better returns in health and social and civic participation, as well as what class was really concerned about, providing greater earnings for low-income families. One of the principal barriers that students face these days is insufficient amount of financial aid. We've seen financial aid drop in relationship to the escalating price of college, and unfortunately Pell Grants and other forms of state aid have not kept pace with that. Unmet financial need among low-income students is a huge barrier for low-income populations. For students, the average cost for community college, a lot of people talk about how cheap community college is, or it's practically free already, but the average cost, when you can consider all the costs that go in, including living expenses, transportation, childcare, it's over $16,000 a year, and only a third of that is captured by tuition. And so that means that there are a lot of students out there who have real financial need, particularly those who can't depend on parental support. To provide you a couple, I'm going to try not to be like Marco Rubio, but I had to take some allergy medicine, so I'm a little dried out. We have pretty decent levels of unmet need. For those of you who are familiar with the previous paper that we wrote around unmet need, the average unmet need for students in the lowest quartile is over $7,000, almost $8,000 a year. For part-time independent students in the lowest quartile, it's $3,500. And particularly hits low-income students of color hard, with Black students averaging over $5,000 and Hispanic students averaging over $4,000 in unmet need. And so what does unmet need do? It forces students to drop down to part-time, to take on more work, to do less of their homework, to work more hours, to borrow more, which I think there is a phenomenon going on. We're seeing more low-income students borrowing more than we have in the past, and sometimes drop out. And the research around why students do drop out shows that financial reasons are the leading reason why students do drop out, because they either needed to leave to go make more money for school, they simply couldn't afford, they couldn't afford their tuition and the related fees, and the opportunity costs of being out of the workforce. We also see high levels of work. Roughly 66% of young community college students work more than 20 hours a week. Research shows working more than 20 hours a week has negative implications for persistence and completion. And then briefly, when David brought up today's student, this paper, we wouldn't be talking about these issues, I don't think, unless an increasing number of students weren't non-traditional, weren't your typical 18-year-old going straight through, did not have the support of their parents. We're looking at more than a quarter of community college students are parents. 17% are single parents. Half of community college students are over 24. And so that's a very different demographic. And those folks then have a different set of needs in some ways than what traditionally we've had to be concerned about. Most of these students are trying to cover work, family, and school, balanced costs for childcare, transportation, housing, while they're trying to get education and training to lead to a better job. Some of you might be familiar with some of the most recent research that came out last week out of the Wisconsin Hope Lab and Sarah Golder-Grab and her colleagues that talked about I was sort of startled actually in their survey that found that half of students are facing a degree of food insecurity and or housing insecurity, and that 20% are hungry. Those are some rough figures to look at, but definitely emphasize then the importance of needing to look more comprehensively at financial aid, and that means looking at some of these public benefits streams that can help support non-traditional students pay for their child care, get health insurance, and pay for food. Unfortunately, there's a good side of here that some students would be eligible for these programs. There's also a difficult story to tell in terms of the fact that both on financial aid and the public benefits side, the administration of these programs happens at various levels of government, and that the policies aren't all nicely combined or aligned in a way that ensures that someone can maximize receipt of benefits while also going to college. Public benefit programs, just like financial aid, feature their own complex set of rules. Even Sandy Baum, who was one of our partners on this project, was shocked by that something could be as complicated, if not more complicated, than the financial aid need analysis, and yet here we are. And so I think, but I think that the fact is, you know, it does matter whether or not you attend part-time or full-time. It does matter whether or not you are even allowed